This is a video that illustrates how to float an image in a web page and how to control the float. Here's an example of it right here with an article with a floated image of Nikola Tesla. And here is the code for that page. We've got the element for the image right here, and in it is an inline style to float this to the right. If we floated it to the left, it would just be on the other side. Let's go back to the right. If we add another image with identical code, it will also be lined up on the left. They'll all float off to the right, one past the other. Note that the way that the code tells the browser to float allows following elements to wrap as well as the one next to it. What if you wanted to stop that? Well, there's a technique in CSS called the clearfix hacks, which clears out any floats. And in this HTML file, we've got a style called self-clear that uses the pseudo element after to create a fake element after the end of the element that uses that is a member of the self-clear class that includes a content of nothing, displays it as a block element, which means puts it below the previous element, and it clears both the left or right float commands. Clear is the counter command for float. So you float something and then you clear the float. So what we have here is an H1, then we float the image, then we have a paragraph, and then we have an H2 with more about AC versus DC, and then another paragraph. And that's what you see in the browser. But the float command that applies to the figure here doesn't dictate where the float stops. It just keeps on going. So anything could float around it. We could stop the float, say at the H2 here. If we put in the H2 some CSS that said style clear both, and now you see that the H2 is not wrapping around the picture. No matter how we organize it, it's always below the image. It's like there's a magical boundary that stops the wrapping right around here. But the clearfix trick is to put a div around the elements with the floating and then let them self-clear themselves. So I'm going to clear out this CSS for the H2. And you can see here I've got a commented out piece of HTML. I'm going to uncomment it, same as the closing div. Now in the body I have an H1, a div that includes the image that is floated right and a paragraph, and then I close up the div, and then we start the H2. div is of the class self-clear, which I define here. The self-clear class creates a pseudo element after its completion that includes nothing and is a block and clears both left and right float. So let's save this and go back and look. Now it's effectively the same as if we had put the inline CSS for the H2. But this allows for a more flexible treatment of floating elements in the page.